News coming out of New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC. The club announced that both Gotham and Scott Parkinson have decided to part ways at this time during the season. Quite frankly, you know, this the timing of this, I think, Lisa, you and I were chatting a little bit as we were again going through the reset of the episode. We were talking a little bit about the timing of this and it happening now, and if this was something that was maybe surprising for some folks, or maybe one of these things where it just sort of felt like the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, this is maybe I'm surprised at the timing of it, and that is something that you and I said, but not at all surprised, because when you look at really where Gotham is in the standings and how they've done this year, and really even when you go back to the preseason and our preseason predictions of Gotham, we expected them to do great things. They had added Christy Mewis, international U.S. international midfielder, to their roster, and just done so many things there with a little bit of moving pieces, adding Ali Krieger, Ashlyn Harris into the mix. But Gotham, they're in 11th place in the standings right now. They've got 12 matches played, and they're 4-8 with a negative 15 goal differential. 3 straight losses they're coming off of. The games that they have won haven't been that pretty. Frankly, it's been scrappy wins, getting them here and there, and it's been a lot of question marks. Even listeners and people that join us live in our chat are saying, what can they do better? What can they do better? And it's really, they've been so defensive. They really haven't been on the attacking end. And I don't actually think it has too much to do with Scott Parkinson and himself. Yeah. He was with Chicago for years, and as a coach, players love him. And that's been the resounding words and phrases that have continued to be out as this news has fallen, saying that it was really a decision that the team made that was very difficult for both Gotham and for Scott Parkinson, because he is so well liked within the organization. But it just came down to a mutual agreement and a benefit for both sides to kind of undergo this change. Now, at this point in the season, it's a little interesting that this change comes now, with Gotham playing 12 games already. They still have about a third of their season left to go in this regular season. So at this time, how quickly are they going to get another coach? Kind of what the next steps are there are a little bit uncertain. But at this point, I think it's pretty safe to say, I think it was reported by Jenna Tonelli, that assistant coaches Bev Yanez and Becky Tweed will be leading training for Gotham until an interim head coach is named.
I mean, yeah, that sounds about right, quite frankly, because within the statement, there's it reads as if it's like a mutual parting of ways, an agreement on both sides here, going into place effective immediately. They're going to eventually name a head coach, but they plan on going, according to the statement, they will go through a methodical process of identifying and interviewing a talented and diverse pool of candidates to serve as head coach for the 2023 season. And an interim head coach will be announced shortly. So this coming midweek, I think is, I think that's where I'm alluding to in terms of the timing of it. But I would imagine that conversations around something like this, they wanted to perhaps get it right, in terms of agreeing to part ways and figuring out things like, and termination of contracts, severance, et cetera, stuff like that. But I'm just thinking about, like, where this club was perhaps like a year ago. It's almost an official year to the date where this club brought on Scott Parkinson, in kind of a mid-season capacity.
Sandra, I had the same thought. August 24th is when Gotham announced that head coach Freya Coombe would be leaving after their most recent game to go to Angel City, because she had already accepted the head coaching position at Angel City. That was August 24th. This news drops on August 11th. So yeah, about 1 year.
Yeah. And, it's this is a team that, kind of found themselves in a position last year where they needed to, go through a vetting process of getting a new head coach. They had another mutual parting of ways with their former head coach and Freya Coombe, who ultimately was tagged as the eventual head coach of Angel City FC. And just due to the optics of that, and the fact that she would eventually have to be doing scouting and navigating the team through things like an expansion draft and signing of players, that the conflict was much greater than perhaps the pros of allowing her to finish with the team. So they, again, a mutual parting of ways. And then this is how Parkinson got brought on into the club, but also like fleshing out their coaching staff. Quite frankly, having a Bev Yanez or a Becky Tweed, within this collective coaching staff. And I think there was a lot of excitement about what this team could do in 22, because they went on an incredible run as this coaching staff got put into place. They were undefeated to sort of close out that 2021 season. They punched their ticket to the playoffs for the first time in many years for this East Coast franchise. And I think we'll just narrow it down to a tacky third for you and I, kind of covering NWSL and by extension this team, like previewing the offseason, taking a look at what they were doing. We wanted to see more from this Gotham FC side, and we had anticipated that they would possibly take that next step, that this would be the year that we would see them kind of take that next step. It wasn't going to be something where they kind of barely made it to the playoffs. This was a team that needed some help as well in those final couple of weeks with results on other across the league. And that's kind of that little sort of decision day weekend that occurred. But we wanted to see, this team kind of take that next step, get the convincing wins, be top four instead of, just sort of inching your way in there a little bit. And we just didn't see that happen. They had an off season that was perhaps somewhat challenging, but you have to look at the landscape of the league. Every other club had to prepare for a double expansion year. So we're looking at things like you're losing not just Kaylin Sheridan, but you lose Dee Herrera. You make a move for somebody like Christy Mewis to try to make that addition there. You bring in a couple of veterans in Allie Krieger and Ashton Harris.
Michelle Bedos.
I just wonder a little bit if maybe those moves were aren't panning out the way that they thought they would. I think you and I, when we've been watching this Gotham team in 2022, there's definitely been some moments where we're very, very early on. I think going back to even the Challenge Cup, where we were watching this team and we were just kind of like, okay, a little unclear about the identity, right, of this Gotham FC team. And that was a question that continued to linger throughout the duration of the Challenge Cup, throughout that entire first half of the NWSL regular season. And I think that even now, with this decision, that's still a question. I think that people are asking of this Gotham's like, who is this team? What is their identity? And I mean, like on the pitch, I think there's a lot of folks that look at this Gotham team and they say, okay, like there's a lot of talented players here. It looks like they have fun off of the pitch. Love the fashion, game day, walkways,
but that doesn't get you points on.
But then you're looking at stuff on the pitch, and nobody really has a clear, concrete answer for that.
And that stuff doesn't get you points on the pitch. And I think that the club overall is making strides to be a top-notch club, right? They rebranded last year from Sky Blue to Gotham. They've grown in ownership, most recently announcing Sue Bird of the WNBA joining the ranks in this one, as well as Eli Manning, NFL player, joining part of the ownership group. So they're making these steps and these strides to be an incredible club. And frankly, at this point in the season, yes, it's the beginning of August. We're entering match day 14 this weekend in the NWSL, but Gotham's only played 12 matches. They have 18 games to go. That's still a lot of games. And if they can get a head coach in, an interim coach in, say in the next week, maybe not by this weekend, but say in the next week, that can maybe turn things around. Like Gotham still has a shot at playoffs at this point. So the fact that this change mathematically, yes.
Okay.
Just because they've only played 12 games. You look at other teams, Washington
got
Spirit,
like 5 games in hand over everyone else.
Literally 5 games in hand. And that might be the saving grace for Gotham, because right now in the standings, Washington Spirit and Gotham both have 12 points. They sit 10th and 11th respectively, Washington and then Gotham. But Washington has played 16 games and Gotham has only played 12.
I love numbers. You love numbers, right? We
No,
love
I'm
the
not
stats.
that great at them,
We
but
love
I
the
do love
stats.
them.
We love the data, right? So mathematically, yes,
Yeah.
New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC squad are technically still in position to pull off a miracle and try to make the playoffs again. So let's talk hypothetically then instead. Do you think right now at this current state that this team as constructed as they currently play their soccer games week to week are going to make a run and go to the playoffs? I'll
My
go
gut
first.
says
I'll go first.
my gut
No.
says no.
No.
My gut says no too, but mathematically they could do it. I think as much as I say it's not fully Scott Parkinson's fault. I'm not going to take all blame off of him. He's the head coach. He's making the decisions and the player rotation and running the training sessions. But there's also assistant coaches and a lot of other personnel there. It's not fully his fault, but it's also not completely not his fault. So
Yeah.
maybe it depends on who they bring into this situation, but how much can they really turn this
Yeah.
around? Like, I think maybe this could be the shakeup that the players need. Frankly, we talked about it.
Maybe. We
Bringing
did.
in Ashlyn Harris, Ali Krieger, Christy Mewis. They've got Mitch Purse up top. They've got Paige Monahan, who's done a lot. They've got Zerboni in the midfield. Like, they have pieces, and maybe this is the shakeup they need. Maybe this has been the conversation for the last few weeks. Hey, how is Scott doing? Do we like
Yeah.
him? What's happening here? And I mean, who knows? Gotham plays this weekend. We'll kind of see how it pans out in that sense. But who's going to be the fill-in?
Yeah, no, that's the big burning question, right? I think maybe we got to try to answer that one next. I think at this point of the season, you got to give it a bet. You got to give it a Yanez. You got to let Tweed continue on. You got to let them try to finish out this season. Quite frankly, I understand that they're going to be doing what do they refer to it as a very, very lengthy, methodical vetting process for a head coach in 2023. And that's great. Start now with that. Start now. Do it now for 2023. I just think you got to roll with the duo that are there right now. They're leading the trainings right now.
I agree. Frankly, I agree completely with Yanez stepping in. I mean, you look at Houston when they lost former head coach James Clarkson and he was put on suspension. Sarah Loudon stepped in and she turned that Houston team around a few months ago and started racking up wins and getting points. So I agree that the assistants know how it's been happening, and they've also seen what hasn't worked over the last several months, and they can make those changes. I'm going to throw another name out there. Mark Parsons, former head coach of Portland Thorns. He went to Netherlands. He was let go from the Netherlands head coaching manager position. Will he come back to the NWSL? I don't think yet, but I wouldn't put it in the question for 2023. I wouldn't.
No. I've seen Mark Parsons coach Mitch Purse before, and I don't want to see it again. So I like the idea. I think naturally, because it's a big name, it's a name with experience. It's a name period that I think people might think that. But honestly, like, with all respect to Mark Parsons, I mean, he's someone who also made a decision for himself as well. I mean, the whole point of leaving NWSL was, yes, it was a great opportunity to try to coach at the international level with a very good team in the Netherlands. But also a way to get back home technically to Europe. Coaches want those things for themselves as well, not just the players, who want to try to make those moves for themselves. So I don't know if he would make that move, for himself or with his family, quite frankly.
I think that's a great point because he did want to get home.
Yeah, I also think it's going to depend a lot on, who Gotham want to identify.
Do you think they would reach out to him and be like, "Hey, Parsons"?
I think that Gotham is going to be the ones being reached out to. I think that they're going to be the ones flooded with a lot of interest. I don't know if they're going to have to be casting those nets as wide as they need to. Listen, this is a franchise. I'm reiterating. I think I'm going in circles here. This is a franchise that people are going to want to be a part of. They went through their rebrand. They're announcing almost like new investorship within their franchise constantly, it almost feels like. And listen, there are good players on this team.
Totally.
You're going to tell coaches that they're going to get to go to one of the biggest sports markets in the world, number one. And they're going to have an opportunity to try to coach, Christy Mewis, Margaret Purse, Ifeoma Onumanu. You don't have to sell yourself. So I would imagine that they're going to go through their process, but I don't know if they're going to need to cast that net as wide as people anticipate. There's going to be folks who are going to probably be reaching out to them and say, hey, how do I get in line for this process to be vetted and interviewed and so on and so forth.
So I'm going to shout out our chat right now because we are live on YouTube. Thanks everyone who's joining us live.
Are they snapping off? Are they popping off?
A lot of names in here. Lucy shouting out Carly Lloyd. She played for Gotham and retired last year. She is a part owner. Will she be a coach? I don't think yet. But also we've seen, I don't think being a part owner will deter her from coaching. I just don't think she wants to coach at this point in her career. I think she kind of wants to be on the business side of things, take a step back. I know she's gotten into golfing at this point, but I don't see her becoming the coach, but not because she's a part owner of Gotham, because hey, we saw that happen with Amanda Cromwell. She was a part owner of Angel City. She got the job at Orlando. You drop your investment with the club and you become the coach. So
part owners. What does Eli Manning got to do to get on the sidelines for Gotham FC? No, I definitely do not want to see that either. Oh, we're talking about that kind of stuff. But I'm curious. I'm curious about that direction. Yeah. I'm curious about in terms of their vetting process, who is going to be like, what are they going to be talking to their candidates about what they want to see happen with their club? What's the vision on the pitch for this team moving forward? And I think that, at the time of, we're talking about a year ago now, bringing on Parkinson, I think that was probably the top candidate for them. Yeah. This was somebody, what I'm about to go into doesn't maybe necessarily exist quite yet in the NWSL, but I'm going to start talking about like coaching trees. And we see that a lot more in other professional leagues. You could point it out in a league like the NBA. You can point it out in a league like the NFL. Coaching trees where you have like really prominent experienced coaches, and coaching and assistant coaches or other coaches within their staff start getting vetted for like head coaching opportunities. So we're looking at somebody like Parkinson, who maybe that could have been the start of a little bit of a coaching tree in NWSL, because Parkinson is someone who's been tied to Laura Harvey in this league for quite some time, has been part of her coaching staff, in a number of teams. This is a head coach who was talked about very highly still in Utah circles, quite frankly, during the Royals days, joined up with the Chicago Red Stars in 2020. And that was an incredibly difficult year for the league, period, because we're talking about the height of the pandemic, this league having to be the first contact sport team sport back into play during the pandemic, playing in a bubble. That's a very, very high stakes emotional thing to go through with the team. And you hear everything out of Chicago from players specifically about Parkinson and the way he is as a person, the way he is as a coach. So when they made this hire, there was a lot of high praise around Parkinson. And it sort of felt like, I think you and I, when we spoke to the GM, and that was one of those things I think that she said surprised her. She's like, she knows about Bev Yanez, that's a former teammate of hers. And she was like, she was equally surprised to see all of the same amount of respect and love sort of being shown to Parkinson, and in terms of the announcement as well. So she was like, I think we made higher.
And when Parkinson came in the middle of the 2021 season, about 1 year ago, he led Gotham on a winning streak towards the end of the season. They did not lose, and they made it into the playoffs towards the end of it. Something that the New Jersey team, Sky Blue, Gotham, had not previously done and been consistent at before getting into the playoffs. So I think there is something to be said there. But it did not work out this year. Things did not pan out, and it's a mutual goodbye from both sides.
We'll see. I guess never say never. This season has a number of teams, I think, in that bottom half of the table who might have some different coaching decisions to make towards the end of the season. So we'll see if Scott Parkinson gets another shot in NWSL, but that's where we're at right now. Mutual parting of ways. Interim coach yet to be named. We both think they should hand the keys over for the rest of the season to Bev Yanez and Becky Tweed. We will see how that continues to develop.